The town of Woodridge, nestled deep in the wild forests of Maine, is famous for its peace and close-knit community. But everything changed unexpectedly when Jennifer Brown, a beloved woman, was brutally murdered in her own home. This crime shook the entire town, causing the residents to suspect each other and start to uncover long-hidden dark secrets. Detective Claire Edwards, who had just moved to the town after a major career failure, was tasked with investigating this case. Little did she know, this case would not only test her abilities but also plunge her into a storm of lies and guilt. In October, the cold air began to roll in, causing the trees surrounding the town of Woodridge to shed their yellow leaves. Each morning, a thick fog covered every corner, turning Woodridge into a dreamy yet eerie scene. The old red brick buildings, quaint little shops, and St. Elizabeth's Church, the center of all social activities, painted a picture of a friendly and close-knit community. But beneath the peaceful exterior lay tangled relationships and secret power struggles. Among the town's influential figures, rumors of corruption, personal gain, and simmering conflicts had spread everywhere, waiting for the right moment to explode. Claire Edwards, a strong and intelligent woman, had just moved from a big city to Woodridge after a major failure in her previous case. Claire had once been a rising star in the city's police force, but a mistake in apprehending a serial killer had sent her into a downward spiral. She decided to leave the city, seeking peace in the small town, hoping to restore her honor and continue her career. However, beneath her tough exterior, Claire was constantly haunted by her past failure. She often couldn't sleep at night, tormenting herself for letting a criminal slip through her grasp. Her decisive nature and loyalty to justice had made her a talented detective, but they also pushed her into dangerous situations, especially as the case in Woodridge grew more complex. Claire wasn't just facing a murder case but also her inner demons. Jennifer Brown, the victim, was a 40-year-old woman beloved by everyone in the town. She ran a charity center and was always a symbol of kindness. Jennifer seemed to have it all: success in her career, respect from the community, and an enviable life. However, a few weeks before her murder, Jennifer started to change. She became distant, communicated less with friends, and seemed to be hiding something. Some said she had uncovered dark secrets related to the charity she managed, causing her to become anxious and stressed. Jennifer, once the beacon of hope in the town, had ultimately become the victim of a crime no one could have imagined. Matthew Carter, 42, was Jennifer's ex-husband. After their divorce, he lived a reclusive life and harbored resentment toward Jennifer. Matthew had once been a successful businessman, but after the divorce, he lost everything, both financially and in terms of reputation. The breakdown of his marriage and the division of assets had driven him into despair, worsening the tension between him and Jennifer. Matthew had a troubled past. He had a history of violence, making him the prime suspect in the case. However, despite many believing Matthew had the motive to kill Jennifer, there wasn't enough evidence to prove him guilty. His story was full of contradictions, and the deeper Claire investigated, the more she realized that this case was more complicated than she had thought. Woodridge was a place where everyone knew each other. The relationships among the residents were interwoven and complex. On the surface, everyone showed respect and friendliness, but beneath it lay jealousy and resentment. The town had a long history of simmering conflicts, especially over power and money. St. Elizabeth's Church, where Jennifer frequently participated in charitable activities, was also caught up in rumors of corruption and personal gain. Everything started from something no one could have predicted. Jennifer Brown, the gentle and kind woman, began receiving threats. A few months before her murder, she discovered that the charity she managed was being misused. Large sums of money were being withdrawn without clear explanation, and seemed to be linked to a shady organization operating in the shadows. Jennifer, with her unwavering loyalty to good values, decided to investigate to the end. However, this wasn't easy. She started receiving anonymous letters threatening her to stop if she didn't want to be in danger. At the same time, people Jennifer had trusted began to distance themselves from her. She became anxious, avoiding friends and colleagues. Nevertheless, Jennifer didn't back down. She was determined to find out who was behind it all, no matter the risk. The relationship between Jennifer and Matthew had been tense since their divorce. Matthew felt deeply hurt after losing his assets and reputation following the breakup. He believed Jennifer had used her influence to push him into a difficult position. Many times, he tried to contact her, asking for financial help, but Jennifer refused. Matthew's anger kept growing. He began to exhibit threatening behavior, frequently showing up at Jennifer's house and sending her menacing messages. In the eyes of many, Matthew had every reason to hate Jennifer and kill her. However, were his actions truly driven by personal anger? Or was this only part of a more complex conspiracy? Jennifer tried to continue with her life, but the threats became increasingly frightening. She decided to meet Claire Edwards, the new detective in town, to tell her about what she was going through. Jennifer shared with Claire about the charity and the people who were trying to silence her. Claire, although worried for Jennifer's safety, advised her to step back and let the police investigate. But Jennifer disagreed. She was too confident in her abilities and wanted to clarify everything before it got out of hand. A few days after that meeting, Jennifer disappeared. She didn't show up for an important meeting at the charity center, something she had never done before. Anxiety spread through the town. Claire sensed that something was wrong and began investigating further into Jennifer's life, only to discover that every clue led to a horrifying secret Jennifer had accidentally uncovered. Jennifer Brown's death occurred on a peaceful evening. After several days of her disappearance, her body was discovered in her old home by a concerned neighbor. The house was dark, with the front door ajar, raising suspicions right from the start. Claire Edwards was the first to arrive at the scene, along with the forensics team. The damp, cold air inside the house, mixed with the mysterious atmosphere, heightened the tension. Jennifer lay on the living room floor, blood dried around her body. The first thing that caught Claire's attention was the opposition of Jennifer's body. There were no signs of her screaming or struggling, just a brief indication of a short scuffle. Strangely, Jennifer clutched a small piece of paper in her hand. With a scribbled note, "Everything is wrong." On the table, Claire found a torn envelope containing a threatening letter from the charity Jennifer had been managing. The letter had been sent a few days before Jennifer's death, warning her not to investigate further. But perhaps the most significant clue was a plane ticket to Newark, booked for the day Jennifer was murdered. It seemed she had intended to flee the town before things became too dangerous. There were no signs of forced entry into the house, leading Claire to believe Jennifer knew her killer. The only fingerprints found at the scene were those of Matthew Carter, Jennifer's ex-husband, who had long-standing issues with her. With Matthew's violent past and previous threats, he quickly became the prime suspect. However, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Everything was too easy. If Matthew were the murderer, he likely would have tried to cover his tracks better. But until new evidence surfaced, all Claire had were scattered clues and a brutal murder to solve. The town of Woodridge was in shock after Jennifer Brown's death. She had once been the symbol of kindness and community spirit, but now her murder had shaken everyone, leaving no one feeling safe. People began looking at each other with suspicion. Matthew Carter, Jennifer's ex-husband, became the main target of criticism and accusations from the town's residents. Matthew denied all accusations. He insisted that despite his conflicts with Jennifer, he wasn't the one who killed her. He claimed he had visited Jennifer's house that evening to talk about financial matters, but left before anything happened. However, Matthew's words were hard to trust. He had a history of violence and had frequently threatened Jennifer after their divorce. The situation worsened as a series of rumors began circulating around the town. People said that Jennifer had gotten involved in an investigation about the misuse of funds, from the charity she managed for shady activities. Some believed Matthew knew about these secrets and killed her to silence her. Meanwhile, Claire faced increasing pressure from both the police and the town's residents. Everyone wanted her to arrest Matthew immediately, but Claire wasn't entirely convinced. Although all the evidence pointed toward Matthew, Claire felt that someone else was behind the crime. Something was being hidden, and she needed time to uncover the truth. Tension in the town grew as the rumors continued to spread. The community began to divide. Some supported Matthew, claiming he was innocent, while others saw him as a cold-blooded killer. The oppressive atmosphere hung over Woodridge, and Claire knew she didn't have much time. While continuing the investigation, Claire unexpectedly discovered an important clue. A security camera from a nearby shop had captured footage of a mysterious woman leaving Jennifer's house on the night of the murder. The image was blurry, but the woman's clothing and figure resembled Grace Sinclair, Jennifer's close friend. This confused Claire, as no one had mentioned Grace during the investigation. Claire began to suspect Grace. She dug deeper into the relationship between Grace and Jennifer, and found that they had clashed frequently in recent times. It seemed Grace was unhappy with how Jennifer had handled the charity, and had argued with her several times. This raised the question, was Grace involved in Jennifer's death? Claire decided to keep an eye on Grace, secretly observing her for several days. She noticed Grace acting strangely, often avoiding any mention of the murder. Most suspiciously, Grace had a secret meeting with an unidentified man, further reinforcing Claire's doubts that Grace wasn't the loyal friend she claimed to be. Eventually, Claire decided to confront Grace directly. In a tense conversation at Grace's home, Claire gradually exposed her secrets. At first, Grace denied all accusations, but she grew increasingly anxious. Claire skillfully presented the evidence she had gathered, and eventually, Grace was forced to admit she had been at Jennifer's house that night. But the truth didn't stop there. In a dramatic moment, Grace revealed that she wasn't the one who killed Jennifer, it was Matthew, who had forced her to remain silent. He had threatened to expose Grace's dark secrets if she didn't comply. Claire immediately realized that the case was much more complicated than she had initially thought. Grace's confession opened up a whole new direction in the investigation. Claire realized she was dealing with a much larger conspiracy. However, she still didn't have enough direct evidence to hold Matthew accountable. She knew that if she didn't act carefully, everything could fall apart, and the case would never be solved. To verify Grace's testimony, Claire returned to Jennifer's house for further investigation. She discovered a detail that had been overlooked earlier: an old mobile phone, hidden in Jennifer's desk drawer. This phone contained threatening messages Jennifer had received before her death, and shockingly, these messages came from a number that Claire traced back to Matthew Carter. However, this evidence still wasn't enough. Claire needed more to bring Matthew to justice. She decided to enlist the forensic team to reanalyze the bloodstains at the scene. The results surprised her. Besides Matthew's fingerprints, there was another DNA sample that didn't match anyone previously investigated. Meanwhile, Matthew began to grow fearful as he realized Claire was closing in on him. He tried to approach Grace again, but this time, she refused to cooperate and threatened to expose everything. Claire continued to gather information about Matthew's past, including his shady relationships with wealthy individuals in the town. She discovered that Matthew had once hired a private detective to follow Jennifer after their divorce, and this could be the key to solving the case. As Claire investigated the private detective, Stephen Fletcher, she uncovered a shocking truth. Stephen had not only been hired to follow Jennifer, but also to threaten her with messages to stop her investigation into the charity. Furthermore, Stephen Fletcher had close ties to the secret organization Jennifer had uncovered. Finally, using the information provided by Grace, along with forensic evidence and testimony from Stephen Fletcher, Claire was able to connect all the dots. She discovered that Matthew had planned Jennifer's murder to prevent her from exposing the dark secrets of the organization he was involved with. and Grace had been a mere pawn in his scheme. Claire immediately brought all the evidence to court, but it wasn't easy facing Matthew. He had calculated everything carefully, leaving little trace. However, with Claire's determination and persistence, all the clues ultimately led to a clear conclusion. Matthew was the mastermind behind the murder. The trial took place under the watchful eyes of the entire town. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense as the prosecutor presented a clear case. Based on forensic evidence, the testimonies of Grace and Stephen Fletcher, and documents proving Matthew's motive, the prosecutor focused on proving that Matthew had meticulously planned the murder, using his connections to cover up his crime. Matthew's defense lawyer tried to argue that the evidence against him was coincidental or fabricated. They claimed that Grace had made up the entire story to cover her own guilt, and that there was no direct evidence proving Matthew was the killer. However, the prosecutor countered the defense's arguments, presenting irrefutable evidence of Matthew's involvement in the crime. Most damning was the security camera footage showing Grace meeting with Matthew before the murder, along with the threatening messages from Matthew's phone, which shattered the defense's narrative. In the end, the trial concluded with an inevitable verdict. Matthew Carter was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. The trial had shown the entire town that no one was above punishment, and that justice would always prevail. The final verdict brought justice to Jennifer Brown, but it couldn't erase the pain Woodridge had endured. Matthew Carter was sentenced, but the town's conflicts and tensions remained. Many people in the town still couldn't believe that someone who had once lived among them could turn out to be a cold-blooded murderer. The charity Jennifer had once managed was further investigated, and serious wrongdoings were uncovered. The leaders of the secret organization Jennifer had discovered were gradually exposed and arrested. However, this process caused the community's trust in local organizations to plummet. For Claire Edwards, the case was closed, but it left her with much to reflect on. She had completed her mission, but the long investigation had forced her to confront many dark aspects of human nature. She realized that sometimes justice wasn't the answer to all wounds. Claire Edwards stood in front of St. Elizabeth's Church, where Jennifer had once worked. The air was growing colder, but inside, Claire still felt unresolved. The case was over, but its consequences lingered in her heart and in the town of Woodridge. Claire knew that dark secrets could exist anywhere, even in the most peaceful places. The story of Jennifer Brown is a reminder that no one is completely innocent, and the truth always holds its value, no matter the cost. Claire had brought everything to light, but she also realized that, in her line of work, the truth sometimes isn't enough to heal the wounds it creates.